Black Swan Green presentation by Greg, Alex, and Daniel. Our topic is topic number 2. In this topic, Jason says, it's all ranks, being a boy like the army. What common function does the presentation of masculinity in Black Swan Green serve? Refer to symbolism, characterization, and/or thematic development in your answer. Project overview. Throughout our presentation, we'll go over the topic of what common function does the presentation of masculinity in Black Swan Green serve. Throughout this video, we will refer to devices such as symbolism, characterization, and thematic development in our answers. Through this presentation, we will pull situations from the text in order to prove how our view of this topic is supported inside of the story, and how our research of this topic in this book helps us with the understanding of the novel, and how our analysis of these examples from the book connect to today's day and age, and whether these examples are still considered masculine in 2020. Thesis statement. The author uses masculinity in the novel as a theme with a greater meaning than just the word itself. Masculinity helps move the story along by bringing out these issues in society in which the book takes place. Jason, the protagonist and main character of the story, is constantly looking to gain approval from his so-called friends, by acting masculine and showing off how manly he actually is in order to climb the ranks among these friends. The author uses the story to show the reader what it's like growing up as a boy in a time period in which the book takes place, and see how it differs from embellished movies and books, as well how it differs from different experiences of people in other parts of the world. In this case, he wants to show what growing up in a small town outside of England is during the early 1980s, and how a little boy trying to meet the standards of what it means to be a man inside of his own society, and what mental toll it takes on him, and how toxic masculinity is a bad influence on these boys inside today's society. Understanding what masculinity is. In order for this presentation to make sense, first you have to learn what masculinity is and how it comes into the novel. Masculinity is qualities or attributes that are regarded as a characteristic of men. In Black Swan Green, we constantly see that the boys of the town are trying to show off how masculine they are and force this standard that all boys should adhere to these qualities and attributes, and if they don't, then they are not a man. We often see this in the book displayed as toxic masculinity, which is a set of attitudes associated or expected from men, which has a negative impact on the male gender as a whole, and has a negative impact on the mental health and wellness of these young boys in this novel. Teaching. The author teaches the readers about the thought process of Jason when faced with situations in which he has to adhere to the attributes of toxic masculinity, which represents the thought of a young boy trying to fit into the box of being a man or male. The author emphasizes the obvious flaws in the logic of young children and their thoughts towards being masculine or being a man, and how this can negatively affect them. He teaches us this by showing us situations of Jason. This allows the reader to think about the experiences similar to Jason and to think to themselves how they might have crumbled to the standards of fitting into the box of being a boy or girl. A good example of this is when Jason hides that he enjoys writing poetry by writing under a different name. He does this to hide what he truly enjoys, and so that he can fit into the standards of being male, because writing poetry is considered not masculine. This situation made me think of when I was younger. I can relate to how the way Jason was feeling is because I've done it in my life. Especially when I was younger, whenever my friends asked me what sport I played, I always said track instead of swimming, because I was scared that I would be made fun of for participating in a swimming because it isn't considered masculine. This is an example of bad influence, as toxic masculinity made me feel the need to lie to my friends so that I could fit into the box of being a man, and so that I wouldn't be made fun of. This is bad because it made me feel bad about being myself and made me ashamed of what I loved to do at the time.
My first in-text example is on page 7 of the novel. We see the Black Swan boys decide to play the game British Bulldogs on the ice. Jason is forced into playing the game because he would be looked at as weak and afraid if he did not play this physical game with them. This example depicts the image of masculinity very well because Jason is afraid that he will get hurt playing this game. But he's even more afraid that if he doesn't play the game, he will be looked at as a so-called ponce, which means being a pretentious man or being called feminine for not playing the game. This is an example of masculinity because playing physical and rough games falls under the category of masculine activity. If Jason does not play the game, then his image of being masculine and one of the boys, will be damaged, which is what he does not want, so he is forced to play. This is still apparent in society today because it is an image of weakness to not play these types of rough and physical games. As boys grow older and become more developed, their bodies put to the test more to see who is more manly and who isn't afraid, which is what Jason experienced through the game of British Bulldogs. My second example is on page 48. We see how Jason's mom unveils his poetry secret in front of the whole family, but more specifically in front of Hugo. Jason wants himself to look masculine in front of Hugo because Jason admires his masculinity and tries to be like him. Jason has kept his poetry skills a secret because it doesn't fit inside the box of masculinity. This explains why Jason uses an alias name for his poetry work. He doesn't want to be seen as a boy who writes poetry because it makes boys seem feminine. He is ashamed to admit it in front of Hugo, specifically because he admires his persona of being very masculine and wishes he had the same image that Hugo portrays. Jason was afraid that he would be made fun of for writing poetry, and his fear came to light when his cousin sarcastically made fun of him. This is exactly what he was trying to avoid, but he couldn't. This illustrates toxic masculinity, as Jason is already being made fun of by his own family, so he is fearful of what would happen if others found out outside his family. In order for him to be perceived as masculine, he has to keep his poetry writing a secret. This still has a significant presence in today's society, as poetry is seen as more feminine activity. Poetry is based on writing about your feelings towards topics or problems, and that is perceived as something that is feminine. Men are taught to be tough, and they aren't taught to write about how they feel, which is why they could lose their masculine appearance if they do so.
Characterization that depicts toxic masculinity.
A specific character and what he represents displays this unhealthiness greatly through his characterization and subtle symbolism. Tom used the connection between the idea it's all ranks being a boy like the army and Black Swan Green's reality. He's considered to be the top dog in the town regarding masculinity and coolness. This is due to him being characterized in the novel as uber masculine to the reader. Told us through stories about his many intimate relationships with girls, his strong physique, personality traits, smoking, which during the time was portrayed as cool because it was seen as rebellious amongst teens, the clothes he wears, his motorcycle, and the major reason being that he is in the Navy. This directly corresponds with the view of masculinity in the novel, because he is like an army commander to the younger boys and they regard him as a leader because of the many masculine aspects of his character. Shown when they are guided by him through his actions because they always try to do things as he does and the boys follow his commands. Also, his death can be seen as a consequence of what happens if he performs such actions. Yes, the actions he did not play a part in his death, but the author used this as a symbol to show that trying to climb the ranks of this false masculinity ladder and following this idea of masculinity the novel portrays will result in nothing but catastrophe. The actions he does are considered particularly unhealthy and frowned upon in today's world